Look at that. That's like a light bulb, a light bulb coming out of the top of my head. I just love it. I love it. Hey, YouTube friends. The numbers make no sense. You look at the numbers, they make no sense. What am I talking about? I'm going to chime in. As long as it's possible, there's been a lot of talk about channels being shut down. I don't put I don't put the word in my title, so I stopped putting the flu thing in my title because I didn't want the advertisement coming up under my videos that said go to this site to get all the information. The official story site to get all your information. That's why I don't put it in my title. People don't put the word in your title because they'll just have it underneath, use your video as an advertisement for their mantras, and the numbers don't make sense. You can find this on many sites. People that are aware of the stories, and the stories are everything, because we have, as human beings, we love to be entertained. I remember as a child, I loved being read to. My mother read stories to me. It was just magnificent. It was magical to hear somebody tell a tale, tell a story, the fantasy of things. And fantasy is everything. It's the more phantasmagorical I recall, the more excited and interested I got, even if it was a little gruesome and terrible. It's like Brother Grimm fairy tales were actually quite disturbing and traumatic in many ways. And I was afraid to go to bed by myself. I was like 4, 5, 6 years old. And hearing these stories made me quite afraid. And of course, in every human being, there is still that little being. Even though we're grown up and we're like massive, we're weightlifting and we're strong and our brains are functioning and we're white coats and we know PhD intelligence in us, we still have that little person in us that gets afraid of the stories. And the stories are kind of like the building block of our nature, the stories, which is why I like art. I like art because I like telling stories. I like to recreate that feeling I had when I was like a 4 or 5 year old telling stories. And I'm telling the story not to an intelligent human being. This is, well, let me put it this way, not to an educated through a system. The education we get as children is just propagating a mantra. It's like propagating. It's not investing. It's not curiosity. So my story goes, whenever I do a successful painting, I feel anyway that I've contacted something. If it's of significance and meaning to someone, it tells a story to that little person inside. Not a stupid individual, but a curious individual. That's how I work with the art. So I'm just briefly going to come in on this because right from the get, I gave myself a little bit of leeway on this phenomenal story, shutdown of the planet over some kind of an illness that's called a pandemic. And I gave myself a little time before I was definitive on what it is that I was going to say, but I had my doubts. Like anyone that is aware of how the system works, culture, civilization, it is a manipulation to detract us from the natural curiosity, our birthright. I'm going to get to this, the birthright, what I feel is our birthright, and how this all fits in to how successful it will be, how the program, what I believe, like many others, a program being rolled out, and the numbers don't make sense. You can check this out yourself. And just off the top, I'm going to try and remember this. About 150,000 people die every day. And if you, this is globally, like everywhere. I think this is, I don't know how they come to this number, but let's say it's true. And then you have a particular illness that is, I'm not sure what it is. It's worldwide, I think it came to about 800 to 1,200 people worldwide die out of 150,000. And then, of course, this is extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. So the tale around this as well, and I don't uh, discard or would imagine there isn't some biological weapon like the First World War with mustard gas, and then the Zyklon gas that was used to kill people in concentration camps, and then you have this extended into Agent Orange in Vietnam, and all these high ethical moral countries using these really nasty means to it's one thing to shoot a bullet at someone, and it's another just to blanket a population with poisons. And personally, I don't discard that this is a poison. If it is a manufactured thing, it has nothing to do with virus, because you can research viruses are not external phenomenon, they're internal. If in whichever form they exist, the people, the white coats give it a name, and some of the white coats are honorable and they research this and they look into it, and yes, you have a whole you have an entire body that is made up of everything other than us. It's like when you get into viruses and bacteria, we have trillions in us, so we're made up of more of something other than who we think we are. This is kind of weird too, when the mass, the total body mass, when you add it all up, is like we're a tiny, what we are is a tiny portion. All the other creatures in us supposedly are much more numerous. So I come down on the side that the numbers just don't make sense, and this exercise is, in my opinion, one of determining how far civilization has succeeded in undermining our birthright, or for us to go along, allow someone to undermine my birthright. A birthright that is rooted in curiosity and the joy, the pleasure I remember getting from stories. We're people sitting around the campfire playing music and telling each other stories. This is how we motivated each other, each other. Oh, I got to talk about each other too. The whole part of that. But we sit around and we encourage each other to have hope and a desire to wake up in the morning. It's like late, and the night comes, and ooh, the stories, the dangerous things that happen. The big bear comes, and the goblins hang around, and all those kind of things, and we huddle together and we protect each other from all that kind of stuff. And I cuddled up to my mom when I was so terrified, and she probably even liked that, to have like a story. And then I said, I can't go to bed myself. Oh, I can't sleep. Anyway, this all, by the way, is happening in grown-ups. It's just perverted and abused because intelligence, or this part in us that likes to manipulate others, becomes active because people say, hey, we can get away with one. We can get a freebie. Well, ultimately, there is no freebie. You got to work for what you get. And if it's not in this existence, in this form of existence, what we understand to be life, there is a much greater realm that we are a part of that we don't really understand. I'm going to get into this a little bit too, but I was going to say each other, our fearless leader comes out. And what is obvious in Canada here, if you listen to this person, the disingenuous presentations, this sort of fake empathy, this we're taking care of each other, this each other thing, this around the campfire feeling, right? You're around the campfire, and then your heart pounds for, the feeling, the emotion that is created around this unity, this community, this unity, community, is really quite extraordinary. And these people understand this. They use it. They fake it. They fake it. You can see how they fake it. They pay us off. They're going to do a big payoff here in Canada. They're going to make people say, hey, this isn't so bad after all because I get a freebie. Well, you don't get any freebies. How can you pay yourself? You're writing a check to yourself. When you get money from what is a government, this is basically writing a check, your own checking account. It doesn't work that way. But I'm not interested in all those kind of things. What I'm really interested in, what I wanted to say, number one, the numbers don't make sense, which is my conclusion then. This is not what it appears to be. The world is not what it appears to be. This is a great tool for a certain portion in the population that enjoys the manipulation. And I think ultimately that is the power play, that pleasure in being able to manipulate another life form, because our essence, our life essence is involved here, not from the point of view of money, gains, anything like that. Why are people perverts? Why do they like abusing children? Why does that happen? There is a unique pleasure in traumatizing the vulnerable. This is part of a real psychotic nature that happens in a small portion of the population that also have a way of figuring out how to get their tentacles into a system and control it in some way. And it's quite sophisticated. I would be on the side of this AI, our intelligence, being instrumental in succeeding to the level that it is succeeding right now. The level of fear is exponential to what I have ever come across. Now, I have not been in a war zone. And obviously, that level of fear of being killed in a war zone is a whole other aspect of feeling fear. Like I say, I have not been part of this. But what I'm experiencing now is people withdrawing into a shell, like turtles into a shell, within this sense of fear of being subjected to a deadly entity that will take you. Like if you were in Bosnia in 1992, you literally had the same feeling, but it's now transferred to an invisible Serbian or Muslim. It's like, they hammered each other. They could still see each other, but this one is actually worse from the point of view you can't see it, and it can be told us that it exists. Yeah, you just make it up and say it exists, and then the next thing you know is an entire planet. I hate to use the idea planet, but I associate this existence is so not what it appears to be that any word that I use, I feel I fall short every time. But I'll just address the obvious, what is so obvious, and the numbers make no sense. So my point, I want to just hammer on this again, and you can listen to channels that give you the information. I'm not a great fan of information, although information would be like me researching how many people die a day. It's 150,000, and then how many have supposedly died from this flu, and it's so many. And so this is information that helps to confirm things, but not my curiosity originates out of somewhere else. So if that element doesn't exist, who cares about the information? The information is useless unless it comes from some inner source, primarily a curiosity. Why would there be a curiosity in the first place? What is it within us that has this, it's a magical sort of sense of possibility that curiosity creates within us possibility. A hope is associated with that as well. And what I want to address as a painter, I always make my videos from that premise that I have a sense of myself in the way I express myself, in the stories I tell visually, and how elegant, how, I suppose, original curiosity is tantalized by originality. It's like you don't need to be original to have an impact and significance, but it tantalizes. It's sort of like coming across a new thing is of a special feeling in us. It's like we see it for the first time. It reinvigorates this feeling within ourselves of possibility. And my point today, what I wanted to say, not regarding the physical world so much, which is something that is obviously happening in a major way. And what I mean to say is that we're now being very influenced by real-time stories. They're not fantasies. Well, they are fantasies, but they're turning into real-time stories in terms of on-the-ground responses that people have. What I've experienced, I don't get out much anyway, but I've been self-isolating for 20 years, so it's no big difference to me. But that sense of apprehension that people have when they see another human being is quite extraordinary and frightening. And here's what I wanted to mention today. That you talk about out there consciousness. And consciousness appears to be something that binds us specifically to each other, and is not only shared by many have gone into this, but all life forms represent consciousness, meaning in our case, I guess I could say self-awareness is part of consciousness, but consciousness throws a blanket, a very specific experience. Consciousness specifies experience for all creatures, whales, dolphins, tigers, tulips, cats, whatever. Consciousness identifies an experience, and that experience is shared. It's part of the mystery. It's part of the mystery, how it ends up. Like science is very good at explaining everything, but the fact that consciousness exists, that self-awareness, it's puzzling. No one has an answer. You can call it a Big Bang created consciousness. It's sort of out of nothing, all in a split second, everything, all the laws, all matter in the universe within a split second out of nowhere. Now that's a phantasmagorical, magical event that is inexplicable, and the white coats are sort of about the whole thing. But hey, believe me, because geez, I throw up my hands. I don't know why anything exists. And consciousness is this curious thing that I want to focus on, because my interest as a human being is more in conscience, which appears to be very specific to our level of experience of higher, I'll even introduce this, higher experience, not just experience, but higher experience is always related to this element of conscience that I talk about quite often. Not the only one. Many people have talked about this. And where do I go with this awareness? First of all, consciousness contains a huge swath. What is human existence? And what is the significance? What is it that I think about? That what conjures? I can literally feel like a conjuring in me as I reflect and ruminate on this, and even if you want to call it meditation, meditation is an abused word, because meditation isn't a specific practice or exercise, but from my point of view, meditation is merely an opening to possibility. That if I make a painting and I'm not open to possibility, I might as well just forget about doing anything. And meditation is part of it in the sense that it's an opening oneself to possibility. So I am thinking about this, and people who listen to my videos have heard me talk about the notion of eternity. And from a very early time, like the Grimm fairy tales, I began to have a romance with this ethereal part of my existence. I didn't know where it came from, emotions, feelings, all those things that aren't like meat and potato. Where is that coming from? I early on, I didn't put it in words exactly, but I began to have a romance with eternity, and art was an incredibly effective facilitator to develop that romance. Not the only one. I mean, many different people have different ways of engaging in this experience, this romantic feeling, and romance in the sense that you're not discouraged by adversity. Romance is something that quite often supersedes any kind of discouragement. You cannot be discouraged when you're romantically inclined. It's like those poets that perceived an obstacle as something to enjoy overcoming. It's like seeing the mountain and saying, I can't get across, it's too high, I can't do it. They took it upon themselves to see it as a challenge. It's like they made it into a virtue to feel like I can overcome, I can climb the mountain and come down on the other side. This is the sort of context of when I say romance. I have a romance with eternity. It's a daunting task to imagine this and take it seriously. And what is it that I do with it? So personally, I've been engaged almost 50 years in producing art, paintings, sculpture, whatever that is conjured within me to feel this connection, this ethereal kind of world that I'm a part of, that most of humanity, and here I'm going to get to this now, this is what is troublesome to me. Most of people don't take this seriously because we have been directed towards a very physical existence, that the physical world is everything. So a person who proclaims, like a white coated scientist type, that they can analyze and reduce things, basically it's reductive with some aberrations into the quantum, and quantum is a bunch of hooey. I find it a little bit more tolerable because it involves the indeterminate part of this fixed reality, that the reality is fixed, but it's indeterminate through a quantum particle, wave, whatever that is, right? It's a bunch of hooey. It's like another explanation just to keep them in the driver's seat. Don't let the artist get in the driver's seat. Well, there aren't that many artists that you would want to drive with anyway, but there are some, and they're fewer and fewer because the hijacking has happened because artists, just like anyone else, they're people, and they enjoy their proclivities, they enjoy their pleasures. Sometimes even more. Sometimes they get lost in their pleasures, and sometimes to the point where their own demise is attached to how much they enjoy the things that they like to do. Anyway, I always get sidetracked. Come on. My thoughts on all of this stuff that's happening to us is that consciousness itself needs to move in a collective sense. It's not just an individual. An individual has a degree of autonomy, obviously, but without, now this is where the each other comes in. These fuckers have figured this out, right? When they come and say, we'll do this for each other, and like a tear comes out how we love each other and take care of the vulnerable. They figured this out because we understand that collectively we move. We just don't move individually. So people hammering on, I understand this, I sympathize. People hammering on the facts, on the information. And it's kind of like, driving a round thing into a square hole. You drive it in, and no matter what, eventually you believe you'll get there. But it doesn't work that way. This information and the truth seekers, these holier than thou bunch, it always changes people. The truth always changes depending on orientation, on your own inner self. There is things we learn, and the truth changes it's not a fixed thing. What is fixed is the desire to do the right thing, conscience. That is fixed. That is like within us. It's unchangeable. Okay, anyway, this thing about moving us into a space, into a direction in this worldly existence is intimately connected to the extent that we can have this romance with eternity. And the romance with eternity is something that I culture in myself through my art, but also in my interactions, in the sense that I want another person to benefit from this feeling that I have. I don't want people to take my point of view necessarily. This is like an argument, it's intellectual. What I would like to have happen is that there is a communication that creates a communal sense within us of moving toward this ethereal part in us that is actually very substantive as we feel it in a romantic sense. We need to find some kind of motivator within each of us that, I was going to say discards the real world, but it's not necessarily discarding, but it's basically superseding the things we've been taught of this material world and connects us, all of us, within this feeling. So my progress as a human being is substantially advanced as other human beings partake in this consciousness as it relates to eternity. Now, I'm going to speculate a little bit. I know this is real for me, but I'm going to speculate, and I'm not attaching any religious values or bearded men in skies. I'm just saying that this is something that is quite real for me from the point of view that I conjure imagery like so many other people always have through art history all the time. We're very creative. We're very imaginative. This is our connection to eternity through consciousnness. But it is advanced. This is my point. If almost 8 billion people play along with this degenerate playbook, then my own consciousness is going to have a much more difficult time with, I'm going to say it, that when I no longer participate in this real world as life, as a living soul, my own consciousness will be troubled with, this is my speculation, will be troubled in whatever it is that we transform, what part of us transforms, how this mysterious, this existence that we obviously share, but also have no real understanding of in terms of what it is, how we transform. It's crucial that there is a communal effort toward this. This is what I feel. It's not like just sitting on a mountain like a Swami and taking in the holy vibrations. It doesn't work that way. I'm convinced, which is why the religious bastards have figured out that whole church-going thing and orienting, because we have a natural sense, like the campfire thing, and helping each other to enjoy this mystery. The churches, the religions have taken that and put their story on it, because this is an innate quality within us. It's our connection to this eternity that is desirous, that is yearning for this completion within this experience through what you can call consciousness. Boy, this is getting long. All because of a pandemic. That was happening before anyway, but the pandemic shows me what a precarious situation we're in at this point if we separate ourselves within this state of consciousness that is connected to eternity. And we keep each other on the path through conscience. That's what I say. We stay on the path through our efforts to live the right way in all aspects, and to be responsible, to deny the phonies, the fakers. We need to be responsible to get these people out of our lives, these fakers, these fake, we love you, we're going to give you money if you play along with us, fakers. This is not how it works. I'm not saying don't take the money if you have good use for it, but I'm saying it's not what it appears to be. You're being bought off. Be aware of that. They're now coming out and saying, we're going to give you lots of money, and it's your own money. It's our own money. It's like, how can anybody give you your own money? It makes no sense, right? But it works because they've isolated us, now really isolated us. We're separate. We're in our homes. It's not because they don't want us to see all like Richie from Boston, the military movements. That is just the cherry on top of the icing. The military shit that they postulate, and it's gonna come. They're gonna come and get you. They're gonna come in. They've already got us. That's what I'm saying, because we've abandoned our birthright. Our birthright is not to isolate ourselves, but is to be in a community. This is the power of consciousness within human beings. And all the other parts, the suffering that'll come, yeah, okay, guns, military, all this oppression. The reason it happened is because we bought into the isolation. That's what it is, and that's the plan, and that's the idea, and that's my conclusion, because the numbers don't make sense. And it's brilliant because they've been trying to vax these authorities. And I was, okay, I'll just do a little desvio, a detour before I end this. I was watching the Apollo thing. They put out this movie recently, the Apollo program. They showed like high HD definition, and there were hundreds of people in the control room. And Maria said, "How could it be that hundreds of people went along with this fakery, if it was fakery?" And what the way that worked in my mind is the the division of labor, the isolation of people was already so extreme that you could pull this off by compartmentalizing efforts and duties. And it was already a test to see how well in a circumstance like that. I think NASA had, I don't know, 20, 30, 40,000 people working, but one guy made a widget and another guy designed a small aspect on a computer program or whatever. It was so compartmentalized that ultimately it was easy to accept the story. And we're being now isolated, compartmentalized as human beings to remain within our walls, and that's how it works. That's how it works. So I'm going to post this. It's got a bit longer. I thought I could do it in like 8 minutes or 10 minutes. What's my final thought? Our success collectively, no matter what colors and orientations we have, our success is a collective effort. And individuals can stand out in their representation of themselves as being somewhat more successful, but the ultimate success is a collective success. And the idea of Jesus in this as being an extraordinary individual who overcame the barriers of the physical and the immaterial world in some form or other is an extraordinary example. But this Jesus character didn't say, "I'm doing it for myself." It was like, it was a story, a parable, an indication of transmitting this possibility, the joy this person must have had in understanding this. But it was nothing unless he was able to pass it on. This is part of it. This is like he was the consummate artist. He was passing on this romance he had with the Father, with eternity. There was no beard on eternity. And I think this is something that teaches me to take seriously and to appreciate every little effort that a person does to continue or to build this romance with the immaterial world, because this is ultimately what consciousness is seeking. That is my conclusion. This is why I thought I'd elaborate on this idea that I put forward, this romance idea, and what's behind it, and how I see myself in relation to others. I'm a bit of an asshole quite often in terms of appreciating people, because I'm like anyone else. I'm disappointed. It's like, or I'm still working through my own levels of greed and selfishness. It's an ongoing struggle, but I've understood that it's not an isolated effort that I'm making. It's a collective effort. And now the reptiles, that small bunch among us who have figured all this out, but have rejected their own epiphanies. They've replaced their own epiphanies for some material gain, which is, it is so pathetic. It's like getting very little, like trillions and trillions of dollars in my pocket, and boats, and sexual satisfactions, and the activities, the hurting of the vulnerable. All this is like insignificant within the scheme of things, not to the person that is suffering, but to the person that's doing. So anyway, I'll end it here. I hope that helped. 35 minutes. Wow.